The outcome of the war was almost certain, and a change in dynastic rule was underway. In the 8th lunar month of 1644, a 6-year-old boy and his mother, accompanied by a large entourage, left the boy's birthplace, Shanjing, today's Shenyang, for Beijing. The name of the boy was Fulin, and he was Emperor Shenzhou of the Qing dynasty. The destination of this journey was their new home in Beijing, the Forbidden City. This high gate, which the young Emperor Shenzhou had never seen before, must have made a deep and novel impression on the 6-year-old. It is the largest gate in the Forbidden City, and it is 37.95 meters high. According to the theory of yin and yang in China, direct north is called Zi, while direct south is Wu. So this gate to the south of the central axis of the Forbidden City was called Wu Men, Meridian Gate. The most eye-catching characteristics of this palace are its crimson walls and golden glazed roof tiles, and this stretching red and gold sets the Forbidden City apart from the buildings surrounding it. The Forbidden City consisted of 2 parts, the front palace and the inner palace. In the front palace, the emperor handled court affairs and held major ceremonial activities, and in the inner palace, the emperor handled state affairs on the daily basis, and it was also the part in which the imperial family lived.
紫禁城的总体部署就是这样，用若干条纵深的轴线来安排这么多的建筑。那么这些建筑呢，都是用院落的形式来展开的。每个院落当中呢，都有成组的建筑，每栋建筑相互之间都是有主有从有正有配。它就是这样用这个建筑的手段来表达封建社会封建礼制所表达的那种等级和秩序。
Legend has it that Ziwei Palace of the Jade Emperor in heaven has 10,000 bays of architecture, and it is also said that there are 9,999.5 bays in the Forbidden City on Earth. Over a period of more than 500 years, the Forbidden City has undergone constant changes, but according to a survey conducted by Palace Museum experts in 1973, there are in fact not 9,999.5, but 8,704 bays of architecture in the Forbidden City. Some people believe that when Emperor Shenzhou saw the Forbidden City for the first time, it was not intact. This was because of a memo presented to Emperor Shenzhou by Du'erguan, the Prince Regent, who had come to Beijing several months earlier than Emperor Shenzhou. In the memo, he told the emperor that Li Zicheng had escaped after setting fire to the palace.
李自成确实放火了，那紫禁城整个这个紫禁城受到什么损坏了？这个实际上清代人自己有一个定位。乾隆朝修订的《日暇旧闻考》就明确说过，紫禁城宫殿是因圣朝之旧而斟酌损益之。意思是什么呢？就是说我对紫禁城的修缮都是在明代建筑的基础上来进行的。这就反过来说明一个什么问题呢？就是说紫禁城宫殿没像传说的那样，因为李自成而受到那么大规模的破坏。
According to records of the Qing dynasty, 6-year-old Emperor Shunzhi ascended the throne at Wanji Gate, today's Gate of Supreme Harmony. In the second year of the reign of Emperor Shunzhi, all the halls along the central axis were renovated one by one and renamed, and this was the most direct indication of a change in the dynasty to be found in the buildings. Wanji Hall was renamed the Hall of Supreme Harmony, Zhongji Hall was renamed Hall of Central Harmony, and Jianji Hall was renamed Hall of Preserving Harmony. For a new regime that was not yet sufficiently stable, the change of character from Ji to He, meaning peace, indicated a longing for peace in the country and a harmonious relationship between the emperor and his people. From that time on, Manchu words could be seen on the horizontal inscribed boards in the Forbidden City. However, Emperor Shunzhi did not live long enough to see the coming of a flourishing age of peace. He died in 1661 at the age of just 24. "18 years later, on a cold winter's night, the imperial main kitchen caught on fire, and the flames soon spread to other buildings. By 2 hours later, the Hall of Supreme Harmony was engulfed in flames. Several days later, 6 eunuchs held responsible for the fire were hanged. But throughout the following 18 years, the Hall of Supreme Harmony remained in ruins. During this period, the young Emperor Kangxi was kept busy directing battles in various places in order to stabilize the rule of the Qing dynasty. During a period of 16 years, he put down the rebellion headed by Wu Sangui, recaptured Taiwan, and defeated invading Russian troops, and signed the only equal treaty the Qing dynasty ever signed with a foreign country, the Sino-Russian Treaty of Nerchinsk. However, peace throughout the entire country was not finally established until the 34th year of the reign of Emperor Kangxi, and so it was only by this time that the emperor could finally find the time and energy needed to plan for the rebuilding of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. However, major problems were encountered during the hall's reconstruction. The Hall of Supreme Harmony had been rebuilt in the years of the reign of Emperor Tianji in the Ming Dynasty some 69 years before, and no one had any real idea as to the exact architectural proportions, and other related data was also unavailable. Emperor Kangxi, who was very fond of reading, consulted many books himself in an attempt to find relevant information, and was disappointed when he could find nothing. But then a person by the name of Liang Zhu brought about a favorable turn in the situation. Liang Zhou was in his 70s and had worked on the Board of Works for more than 40 years since the reign of Emperor Chongzhen in the Ming Dynasty. According to biography of Liang Zhou, the elderly man made a 1/10 wooden miniature of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, and the final reconstructed hall was based on this miniature. It is truly extraordinary, then, that each wooden life-size part was able to be perfectly joined with the others. Fortunately, in the 34th year of the reign of Emperor Kangxi, all the materials used in the reconstruction of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, along with details of measurements and sizes, were all recorded in detail in a book entitled Historical Events of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the only detailed record on the reconstruction of the hall. This book is still of great value today for large-scale repair and renovation work on the hall. Two years later, in the 36th year of the reign of Emperor Kangxi, reconstruction of the Hall of Supreme Harmony was completed, and a grand ceremony was held. But this was not only a celebration of a palace hall, it also marked the beginning of a new flourishing age. And this is the Hall of Supreme Harmony we see today. Built on a base of white marble that is 8 meters high and made up of 3 layers, the Hall of Supreme Harmony is the core of the Forbidden City, and also the climax of the architectural music movement of the whole Forbidden City. The design of all parts of the hall focus on just one purpose: highlighting the supremacy of imperial power. The Hall of Supreme Harmony used to be the highest building in Beijing City. 36.57 meters from the courtyard to the main ridge, it is as high as a modern 12-story building. The Hall of Supreme Harmony is also the largest building in the Forbidden City, occupying a space of 2,381 square meters, half the size of a football field. The proportion of its length to its width is exactly 9:5, figures that symbolize supremacy. The Hall of Supreme Harmony, along with the Hall of Central Harmony and the Hall of Preserving Harmony behind it, constitute the main body of the front palace, and people usually refer to them together as the 3 Great Halls. Many parts of the constructions in the Forbidden City are related to the number 9. This is because 9 is the biggest of the 10 digits and therefore symbolizes supremacy. This is evidenced in the imperial palace by the 9 horizontal and 9 vertical lines of nails on its gates, as well as the 9 4-footed animals on the eaves. However, the number 9 alone is not enough to express the supremacy of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, and so there are sculptures of 10 4-footed animals on its roof. The additional one is called Hong Shu, or the 10th animal sculpture, and this is the only such case found out of all of the ancient constructions in China. The Hall of Supreme Harmony remains the biggest wooden building in the world. But the arrangement inside this biggest hall in the world is remarkably simple. Set off by its base, the throne of the emperor is the only main object. But the awesome prestige of imperial power can be felt in every corner. There are altogether 72 pillars in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. The 6 pillars surrounding the throne are gilded, and there is an extremely large dragon on each pillar, and these, of course, also symbolize imperial power. Anyone standing in the middle of the 6 pillars looking up can see an extremely large coiled golden dragon in the ceiling above the throne. The silvery pearl suspended from its mouth is called the Xuan Yuan mirror. The reconstruction of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, sponsored by Emperor Kangxi, changed its original 9-day pattern into an 11-day pattern. It can be said that this was the most practical change that occurred as a result of the reconstruction.
康熙34年重建太和殿的时候呢，就考虑到这个防火的因素，所以呢就把这个斜廊呢，这个木构的斜廊啊改成砖墙了。同时呢，把太和殿的这个两边的这个游廊改成了夹室，就形成了我们现在看到这个面阔11间这个格局。实际上呢，还是没有改变原来这个面阔9间周围廊的格局。
In June 2004, when an inspection was carried out before the start of large-scale renovation of the Imperial Palace, cameras were there to follow the inspection team into the inner roof of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. This is the largest beam mounting of a wooden architectural structure in the world. The colored drawings on the ridge purlins were painted during the reconstruction in the 34th year of the reign of Emperor Kangxi. They are colored drawings of the highest grade, a pattern featuring dragons created 300 years ago. Cameras also captured a mysterious object on tape. It is in the center of the top of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, well above the ceiling. This is the magic signboard placed here as ordered by Emperor Yongzheng himself. And in the files of the Imperial Palace retained in the China No. 1 Historical Archives, there is indeed a record of this which reads as follows. On the 12th day of the 8th month of the 9th year of the reign of Emperor Yongzheng, 3 magic signboards were placed in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, the Hall of Supreme Harmony, and the Palace of Heavenly Purity separately, as ordered by Emperor Yongzheng.
安放浮板呢，本来是古代建筑中啊，风水学中的很讲究的一个内容哈，为的是镇宅辟邪、保佑平安。雍正的这几块浮板呢，它除了传统的道教八卦图外啊，还增加了藏传佛教的咒语。 这也反映了呢，它是助教为我所用，来保佑他的平安。
The placement of the magic signboards, as directed by Emperor Yongzheng, definitely indicate that the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the Palace of Heavenly Purity, and the Hall of Mental Cultivation were the most important places in the Forbidden City. Interestingly, the Hall of Supreme Harmony is the only one of the 3 not within the inner palace of the Forbidden City. In contrast to the front palace, the second half of the Forbidden City is called the Inner Palace, and this includes the 3 rear palaces where the Emperor and Empress lived, the 6 eastern palaces and 6 western palaces where the imperial concubines resided, and the 5 eastern dwellings and 5 western dwellings where the princes lived. Starting from here, the climax of architectural music movement of the Forbidden City, characterized by masculinity, changes into a slow-paced movement characterized by femininity. The Palace of Heavenly Purity, the Palace of Earthly Tranquility, and the Hall of Union and Peace are together called the 3 rear palaces. Before the days of Emperor Yongzheng, the Palace of Heavenly Purity had always been the imperial sleeping palace used only by the emperor. But compared with the Hall of Supreme Harmony in the front palace, this palace is 11 meters lower and 1,000 square meters smaller than the Hall of Supreme Harmony. But standing in this palace, people can feel very relaxed. During the Ming Dynasty, there were 9 chambers in the Palace of Heavenly Purity, and it had 2 stories. There are 27 beds on both the first floor and the second floor, and the emperor could choose freely from among these. In the Qing Dynasty, the East Chamber of Warmth and the West Chamber of Warmth were converted into 2 studies. During the Ming Dynasty, the Palace of Earthly Tranquility was the sleeping palace of the Empress. In the Qing Dynasty, the inner decoration of the palace was greatly changed, and it became the palace with the most distinctive Manchu characteristics of all the palaces along the central axis. There are heated brick beds in the west, north, and south sides. The west brick bed was used for offering sacrifices to the spirit tablets in the morning. The north brick bed was used for offering sacrifices in the evening. And the northeastern corner is the kitchen where meat was cooked for sacrifices. This kind of arrangement has its origin in the customs of the Manchu people. We can see from the inscription hanging in the East Chamber of Warmth in the Palace of Earthly Tranquility that the arrangement of the palace was modeled after the Palace of Peace and Tranquility in the Imperial Palace in Shenyang, where the Empress had lived. Imperial concubines lived in the halls on the 2 sides of the 3 rear palaces, and these were referred to as the 6 eastern palaces and the 6 western palaces.
东西六宫呢，它取自于周礼的6卿6宫制度，但是它更多的是融入了自汉代以来所形成的周易阴阳哲学思想。它的建筑布局从平面上看呢，是一个坤卦的卦象，象征阴，也就是说这个地方居住的是徽者，其功能呢可以从宫殿的命名上反映出来。比如说承乾宫，为什么叫承乾宫呢？就是说居住在这个地方的徽者有顺承皇帝。所以说东西六宫的建筑它体现的是3纲5常，特别是虎尾7纲的伦理道德思想。
The 6 eastern palaces and 6 western palaces are much lower than the 3 rear palaces, and this indicates the subordination of the imperial concubines living here. These are paintings of maids of honor as ordered by Emperor Yongzheng. Every emperor hoped that the imperial family name would continue and bear many offspring, so as to make the dynasty prosperous and ensure that its rule of the country would last forever. In 1856, a baby girl was born, and later she became Empress Dowager Cixi, a woman who was to rule China for 48 years. The Palace of Preserved Elegance was her first residence after she entered the imperial palace, but the interior decoration we see now was made at the cost of 630,000 taels of silver in celebration of her 50th birthday. Orchids were regarded by ancient Chinese as carrying the fragrance of a king, and also symbolized the birth of a baby boy. This pattern that combines the orchid and the longevity stone is believed to bring luck regarding the birth of a baby boy, as well as longevity. It might be a coincidence that Empress Dowager Cixi was conferred with the title of Orchid Nobility, but before long she did give birth to Emperor Tongzhi, and became even more powerful because of his son. The decoration of her sleeping palace became luxurious, with even dragons being displayed in her courtyard, the only case of this in the 6 eastern palaces and 6 western palaces. Before the days of Emperor Yongzheng, the Hall of Mental Cultivation in the inner palace used to be a commonplace. After Emperor Yongzheng ascended the throne, however, he did not follow that tradition that required the emperor to live in the palace of heavenly purity, saying that he could not live in the palace where his father Emperor Kangqi had lived for more than 60 years. He decided instead to live in the Hall of Mental Cultivation outside the Gate of Lunar Glory, and required a simple renovation of the hall to be carried out. This decision by Emperor Yongzheng changed the pattern of the inner palace of the Forbidden City, and from that time on, the Hall of Mental Cultivation became more and more important. After the sudden rise in the status of the Hall of Mental Cultivation, it did not remain simple for long, as decorations soon followed. In the Forbidden City, an important standard to measure the status of a palace is whether it benefits from good sunlight or not. In order to improve the sunlight in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, it became the first hall in the Forbidden City to use glass. In the first year of the reign of Emperor Yongzheng, the construction department of the Imperial Household Department recorded the following in its Records of Carpentry Work. On the first day of the 10th month, an imperial edict was received, and 2 pieces of glass were placed in the east and west windows, in the north of the corridor of the rear sleeping chamber of the Hall of Mental Cultivation. At the time, glass was very rare indeed, and had to be imported from overseas. The Hall of Mental Cultivation is close to the front palace of the Forbidden City, and so it has the function of combining the office and the resting place of the emperor together. The back half of the hall is his bedroom, the place where the emperor rested. But if he wanted to deal with state affairs, all he needed to do was walk through this corridor to get to the front part of the hall, a walk that took less than a minute, and this greatly improved his efficiency. Starting from the reign of Emperor Yongzheng, 8 Qing dynasty emperors made the Hall of Mental Cultivation their residence, as well as the place where they dealt with state affairs, and this was a practice that only came to an end when the Qing dynasty itself came to an end. This small palace witnessed the history of a dynasty, from its prosperity to its decline. In the Forbidden City, great importance was attached to maintaining hierarchy while retaining an atmosphere of grandeur and solemnity. However, there is one structure here that is totally different in style, one that is more lively and romantic. It is the garden of the Palace of Peace and Longevity, commonly called the Qianlong Garden, because it was the masterpiece of Emperor Qianlong, whose natural position was somewhat unconventional and who was fond of traveling. This narrow, long garden with winding paths that lead to secluded spots is located in the northeastern corner of the Forbidden City, and it comprises 4 separate courtyards which are interconnected, and the scenery in each courtyard is different. There is beautiful scenery representing the area south of the lower reaches of the Yangtze River, which Emperor Qianlong greatly admired during his inspection tours of the south. And from almost every angle, we can see that the emperor was greatly influenced by the cultural tradition of the Han people. In ancient China, there was a sacrificial ceremony called qishang, the purpose of which was to pray for blessings and to get rid of inauspicious omens. Later, this practice evolved into a custom in which people went on an outing to the suburbs in late spring, and men of letters and scholars would invite each other to a gathering. The most famous event of this kind was recorded in Wang Shizhe's preface to the poems from the Orchid Pavilion. Clear water is flowing in the winding channel, and a wine cup goes down with the flowing water. If it stops before a man, he has to recite a poem or write an ode, and if not, he is made to drink as a forfeit. This is an account of a gathered crowd holding a Shisheng sacrificial ceremony by a winding water channel while enjoying music, and it was according to this that Emperor Qianlong named the pavilion Qishang Pavilion. In this garden is the Three Friends Pavilion, a windowed lodge the inside of which is decorated with pine trees, bamboos, and winter sweet. Pine trees are sturdy, tall, and straight. The winter sweet blossoms in winter despite the cold, while green bamboo stands straight and is hollow in the center. As all three can stand the bitter cold without withering, they are called the Three Friends in the Winter Cold. Ancient men of letters regarded these three plants as the symbols of integrity and nobility. Emperor Qianlong used the Three Friends Pavilion to express his cultural gentility. But more importantly, he wanted to show his intention, as an emperor of the Qing dynasty, of mixing with Han intellectuals and exchanging and sharing thoughts with them. The efforts made by the Qing dynasty from the reign of Emperor Kangxi over a period of 7 decades had paid off. By the reign of Emperor Qianlong, the population of China had exceeded 100 million for the first time in several thousand years, and there was plenty of silver in the treasury. It was in this period that China's overall national strength reached its zenith, and in which the agricultural economy also reached a very high level of development. Emperor Qianlong now began to direct the largest set of reconstruction projects that the Forbidden City had seen since 1420. Among the projects, 2 were closely related to a change in the political system. The first one was the reconstruction of the Qian West Second Dwelling and the area surrounding it. The Qian West Second Dwelling had been the place Emperor Qianlong had lived as a young prince. So why, then, was he embarking upon a large-scale reconstruction of this site? In order to answer this question, we have to start with the imperial system of designating the crown prince. Before the time of Emperor Yongzheng, determining who was to be the crown prince often entailed fierce and bloody court struggles. Emperor Yongzheng changed this by making the method an entirely secret process. He wrote 2 testaments designating a successor to the throne himself. One was hidden behind the horizontal board, inscribed with the characters meaning open and above board, in the Palace of Heavenly Purity, and the other was carried by himself. Before the death of the emperor, this fact was kept a secret, and only after the emperor passed away could the 2 testaments be examined and checked. If the 2 were exactly the same, the heir to the throne could be publicized, and the preparation for the grand ceremony of enthronement could begin. Emperor Qianlong was the first emperor to become emperor by means of this secret system, and so before this he had not enjoyed the treatment of a crown prince. Because of this, he wanted to upgrade the status of Qian West Second Dwelling, his old residence, desiring to see it attain the status of a palace, one that no one would be allowed to live in. In this way, he thought his legitimacy to the throne would be reinforced. After the reconstruction, the main buildings in this 3-lined courtyard were renamed the Hall of Devoted Esteem, the Palace of Double Glory, and the Hall of Emerald Green Cloud. And together they were called the Palace of Double Glory. The name Palace of Double Glory had been proposed by Zhang Tinyu, a minister from the Han ethnic group. Double Glory referred to Shun, a wise monarch in ancient times, and Emperor Qianlong, who was very familiar with Han culture, very gladly accepted this proposal. After the reconstruction of Qian West's second dwelling was completed, the buildings surrounding it were also reconstructed and became supporting facilities. Qian West's first dwelling to its east was changed into Study of Pure Fragrance, and a small stage was built inside it named Reserves of Ballads and Hymns, and this was used by the emperor for watching short items of performance. As well as this stage, a larger one was set up in the courtyard, and together these two stages were the first stages erected in the Forbidden City. After Emperor Qianlong ascended the throne, he lived in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, but always used the Palace of Double Glory as a good place for family gatherings as well as a place to entertain his ministers. Due to the fact that Emperor Qianlong was a follower of Tibetan Buddhism, he arranged for the construction of the most important piece of Tibetan Buddhist architecture in the Forbidden City, the Tower of Raining Flowers to the southwest of the Palace of Double Glory. Tibetan Buddhism was first introduced into the imperial palace during the Yuan dynasty, but reached its zenith in the Qing dynasty. The construction of the Tower of Raining Flowers was carried out on the one hand to meet the emperor's needs as a practitioner of Buddhism, but on the other hand, it had another more important function, maintaining good relations with the Mongols and Tibetans in the frontier regions of China, and strengthening the solidarity between different ethnic groups so as to consolidate the unity of the country as a whole. The second project completed during this series of renovations in the Forbidden City was one closely related to political reform, the Palace of Peace and Longevity. Soon after ascending the throne, Emperor Qianlong proclaimed, "In order not to surpass my grandfather Emperor Kangxi, who reigned for 61 years, I will abdicate and hand over the throne to my son in the 60th year of my reign." This new method of handing over the throne meant that for the first time ever, a retired emperor would be living in the Forbidden City. The Palace of Peace and Longevity was a place for Emperor Qianlong to spend his remaining years after his retirement, and as the palace for the emperor's father, the rank of the Palace of Peace and Longevity was not to be inferior to the dwelling place of the emperor. The Palace of Peace and Longevity is divided into two parts. The front part is similar to the front palace, while the back part is the sleeping place, and there are all kinds of supporting facilities. It is like a miniature Forbidden City, and the cost of constructing the Palace of Peace and Longevity came to as much as 1.3 million taels of silver. The two gilded bronze lions standing in front of the gate of the palace alone consumed 334 taels of gold. There can be no doubt that this project of building a palace for the retirement of a reigning emperor was the most important project of all. The Board of Works gathered the best craftsmen and artisans from all over the country, and among them was an architect with the surname Lei, whose ancestors had all been architects. This is a chart of the external appearance of all the buildings in the Forbidden City along the central axis, from the Gate of Great Qin to the Palace of Earthly Tranquility, and the chart is more than 5 meters long. The name of each building and the distance between them are clearly marked in units of tuan, or 1/30th of a meter. Starting from the years of the reign of Emperor Kangxi, the Lei family had been established for more than 200 years, and they were engaged in the design of imperial architecture for the court. Among the works designed by this family, many are now listed as World Cultural Heritage Sites, such as the Forbidden City, the Summer Palace, and the Temple of Heaven. This design family of 7 generations was called the family of architects Lei. In ancient China, architectural design was accomplished through combining 3 methods: written explanations, drawings, and iron models. An ironed model was a 3D design model, and it was a product peculiar to architectural design in ancient China. The ironed models made by the family of Lei are retained today in the Palace Museum. An ironed model was made of cardboard, sorghum stalks, and wood. After the model was completed, it was necessary to use a small iron to smooth out the details, hence the name ironed model. This is the ironed model of the Palace of Eternal Spring in the Forbidden City, designed by the Lei family in the late Qing dynasty. In relevant places on the ironed model are detailed written explanations and indications of architectural proportions. After being showcased in a layer-by-layer manner, the inner structure of the building can be seen clearly. Such an ironed model was of course mainly made for the emperor, so he could see how the building would look. It was the emperor, after all, who had the final say in the construction of the palace. After the completion of the grand and luxurious Palace of Peace and Tranquility, called the Miniature Forbidden City, Emperor Qianlong did not live in it for a single day. After his abdication, he continued to live in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, from where he continued to control state affairs until he died at the age of 89 in 1799. During the period from the years of the reign of Emperor Yongle in the Ming Dynasty to the years of the reign of Emperor Qianlong in the Qing Dynasty, the Forbidden City underwent 300 years of construction, reconstruction, and renovation. The Forbidden City we see today is the result of efforts of a number of emperors. And by now, the Forbidden City had already witnessed the development of history over a period of 300 years. Yet the wheel of history was to turn still further.